Look out. Brother. Be careful. Shirli overloaded the suppressor power. Protected ZeKe. Would you be surprised? Isn't the suppressor an auxiliary device to resist the Omnium? Why can it release shields? During the game's internal testing period, the suppressor is indeed a kind of ability device. But now it's a public test. So let me make it up for you. Ops, let me be clear with you. The first is the principle of the suppressor. What we learned in the game is that with the suppressor, you can resist Omnium radiation. Under this description, people's perception of suppressors is a kind of protective device, or a protective shield covering the whole body. But here's the problem. If it's a protective shield, why can you only protect yourself? And can't protect others? Shirli overloaded suppressor and fainted. No one used his own suppressor to deploy the shield. Are they all just people who don't help others? It is clear that the existence of suppressors as protective shields is untenable. This is the official propaganda message of Hykros. You don't need to know how it works. You just need to know that it has this function. But the ruins tell us the truth. In the ruins, we can know. After someone was injected with the virus, put on the suppressor prototype. But it didn't work. During the research and development of the suppressor, cooling has been mentioned many times. We can get the answer. Omnium accompanied by some kind of virus. Low temperature can be used to inhibit the activity of this virus. That's how the suppressor works. For more information, please see my series of TOF Edit. This is against the official introduction. But it's the most reasonable. The more powerful the Omnium we use, the more powerful the suppression energy needed. Does it sound like you're trying to get stronger? By level up the suppressor? Because Shirli has to use more powerful Omnium to maintain the shield. But the suppressor itself is not capable. Cannot provide the corresponding suppression energy. So it was overloaded. And because the virus is no longer inhibited, it began to erode Shirli. Another reasonable explanation for the virus is that once the aberration starts, it can't stop. So the virus can't be treated? That's what the official said. It can be spread through ways out of cognition. So don't use the Earth mind to think it. But there are antibodies. On the Yuan Wang spacecraft, those who have received Omnium antibodies have become divine descendants. Now the technology is lost again. Otherwise, the chrono chamber will no longer have to study Omnium antibodies. Let's continue with the last issue. After obtaining the permission of the simulacrum system, to express our gratitude, run errands for the scrapper. The scrapper once mentioned to us. The purpose of the ecological station is to monitor the barren neighboring town. Then let's take a look at this town. Only the ruins were left under the devastation of the cataclysm. Do you remember that Aster Island was set as a holiday island for the rich? The town used to be a leisure mecca. The situation and the scene make people sad. Here we should pay attention to the warning that surrounds the town. Keep out. Who do you think poses the greatest threat at post-apocalyptic days? It must be aberrants in the post-apocalyptic theme. But not in the Tower of Fantasy. Although the aberrant sounds horrible. But think back. In the exploration of the open big world, how many aberrated creatures have you destroyed? Even aberrant dogs are domesticated by ravagers. In fact, in the worldview of Tower of Fantasy, the threat posed by aberrated creatures is very low. They have a sense of territory. They don't even leave the area they are in. Only lost wanderers will die here. But as long as you stay away from the aberrated area, there will be no threat. At post-apocalyptic days, the biggest threat is people. Ravager based on the concept of mercenaries. Burn, kill, loot, do everything wrong. The hyena gang formed with the idea of advocating freedom. Rob passersby, rob a shelter. With the idea of drifting along aimlessly. Survivors help each other to survive at the shelter. These are the post-apocalyptic threats. Think of the people in Port Banjas. People called him God because of his arrival as businessmen. And created a day of prayer. You can think of many people in the past drift along aimlessly. But it's not all the survivors' fault. For the world of the Tower of Fantasy, the cataclysm. It's the real end of the world. Then faced with a shortage of resources. The danger of aberration at any time. It's me, I drift along aimlessly too. In this context. ZeKe, who can propose to create a shelter. There's no doubt that he has a messianic existence. When we get back to the ruins, Shirli started to fix it. Some people think that Shirli always makes the protagonist run errands. But no matter repairing the spacecraft or the deconstructing machine, it all depends on Shirli's ability. The protagonist can only help a little. Instead of saying that the protagonist is always running errands, it is better to say that the protagonist does not have this ability. The same is true of a lot of later plots. Franz and the protagonist are just doing their jobs. On the other hand, Franz has been running errands for the protagonist. After eating the grilled fish, Shirli changed the battery, too. Also named the problem. There's something wrong with the lens. So Shirli is not a vase. If she didn't die very early, it will also exist as Cobalt B in the future. There's one detail about Shirli's character. The number 5 sign on the chest. This number 5 represents the number of angle of clemency. But I don't understand why she has this. The only reasonable explanation is that Heirs of Aida's people have been in contact with her long time ago. Shirli saved the man of Heirs of Aida. Then the person saved by Shirli gave the badge out of gratitude. So I always wondered if there was a locator or something in it. It can be seen that the Heirs of Aida has been watching Shirli all the time. The water core is used as a lens to unlock the camouflage of the ruin. We're on our way in. ZeKe run here angrily. I told you clearly, it's dangerous here. I'm just trying to help. Help? You will only make a mess for me, but... No buts. Get back there right now. Don't do it without my permission. I hate you most. Scold her now, but feel regret only when he lose her. It is Franz who realized that. Shirli is capable. That's when ZeKe realized that Shirli had grown up. She is no longer a little girl hiding behind her brother. Comfort Shirli's job. Naturally, it came to us. Shirli is not an unreasonable child. She knows it's not easy for her brother to be a leader. Want to help her brother lighten the burden. But ZeKe always treated her like a child. Whatever she do is wrong. Even still think it's good for Shirli. The disadvantages of ZeKe being both a father and a mother finally comes out. Shirli is like a child who confesses her mistake to her parents. With the encouragement of the protagonist, found ZeKe. ZeKe has already let it go at this time. Shirli bravely expressed her thoughts. Like ZeKe said, there are few people in this shelter. There's a lot that need to be done. As the main fighting force of the shelter, ZeKe has to do all the dangerous work in person. The Ravager happened to come. A battle for Shirli is about to begin. Look at this Locust Transit Ravager. It should be no problem to destroy 2 or 3 Aster shelter. ZeKe asked why the early warning system was not working. Palu replied that it was subject to electromagnetic interference. There are 2 possibilities. One is that the Ravagers lurked near the shelter early. Construct the interference sources. There is another possibility. The interference source comes from the suppressor of the protagonist. The Heirs of Aida has tampered with it. So it is the protagonist who interferes with the early warning system from within, to make the attack so sudden. It's too late for personnel to move. Here, let's check the location of the shelter. The Aster shelter is based on the wreckage of the ship. Back to the mountains, it's easy to defend but difficult to attack. If the early warning system hadn't failed, the shelter is capable of a war. The strength of the shelter is pitifully weak. Celine, Palu, Shirli, ZeKe. Protagonist. A big shelter. Only 5 men can fight. But when watching the hustle and bustle, can gather a large number of people. What's interesting is that Shirli's weapon, the double knives of crown. This means that Shirli can also connect to Hykros' armory. How many people have the scrapper opened the back door for? In that case, Hykros shall know something about Shirli. Now it feels like the whole world knows that the ZeKe and Shirli are in Aster Island. Only ZeKe thought they were safe. ZeKe wants us to activate the Omnium Guard. Start a counteroffensive. With the guards joining us, the situation began to reverse. The Ravagers are starting to ask for support, too. Does this space rift look familiar? Why is it so like the Heirs of Aida's? As a matter of fact, the Ravager really doesn't have this technology. Why would I say that? Because when attacking, the Ravager asked for help by the space rift. But when they retreated, they flew away. Why run away if you can open space rift? It only means that either the space rift is scarce, or it's provided by someone else. The Heirs of Aida can be regarded as profligate on using the space rift. The Ravager can't reach that level at all. Shirli gave us another compound bow. Under the efforts of the protagonist, finally solved the space rift. It is only the enemy's airborne troops that we repel. Just as we regrouped, the enemy army has broken through the front gate defense. Pay attention to what follows. Aberrated creatures are really no threat at all. They have been transformed into war machines to use. Now believe me, there's no threat from aberrated creatures. The Ravager's technology tree is all about domestication. ZeKe was attacked. Shirli got in the way. It's a tragedy. The detail here is that the suppressor turns on the red light. But when Shirli fell to the ground, the suppressor turned into a blue light again. This means that the suppressor failed only in an instant. And then it returned to normal. Since the people did not repair the suppressor, it also means that the suppressor is good. Then here comes the problem. Will a momentary failure cause radiation aberration? After the cataclysm, the suppressor hasn't been born yet. During this period, people will also be alive. This reinforces what I think is the aberration caused by the virus. After the cataclysm, the virus spreads around Tower of Fantasy. The more periphery, the more likely to survive. And Vera's Tower of Fantasy happens to be the one that uses the least Omnium. So the virus is also the least. The setting of aberration caused by Omnium radiation. Most of the time, it is untenable. If there is radiation, there will be a method of isolation. Since the suppressor can isolate radiation. So why not use this technology? To set up a quarantine zone? So I think the Omnium radiation is just excuse. There are 2 pieces of evidence. The first one is the ice and snow of Warren Snowfield. Warren used to be a prosperous port. But after Hykros used the Omnium, the cold air was discharged into the Warren area, causing the whole area to become a land of ice and snow. Why does Hykros use so many cold air? A reasonable explanation is to use low temperature treatment of viruses that associated with Omnium. The Heirs of Aida base is also built in Warren. The Omnium has something to do with low temperature. The second is Sparks notes. The description says that Lynn commissioned the Science and Technology Department to produce, but it was actually left by Dr. Rebellia. This means that all the copywriters we see are Hykros' remarks to the outside world. But what's the actual situation? Even the players don't know the whole. And because of that, you seeing my reasoning will find that it's a far cry from the description in the game. But it's very reasonable. This is because we uncover the truth behind Hykros. Back to the plot. The Coquettish operation is coming. The protagonist begins to pursue the Ravager. But the situation is very strange. We took a flying wing attack ship, but the Ravagers all ran away. Instead of protecting the ship, even blew it up. This is what many people complain about. A ship that will crash even if you don't fight. It's true that we didn't shoot it down. Pay attention to the sky here. Tower of Fantasy has made all the retreating Ravagers. The quantity is very large. They are retreating in the direction of Raincaller Island. But no one came to save the ship. There are signs that the ship was abandoned by Ravagers. So what's the reason? In order to clear the suspicion of the protagonist, the appearance of the protagonist can be linked to the attack on the shelter. This is also common in film and television works. Miserable things happen because of someone's arrival. The protagonist became the first suspect. But suppose we repel the enemy and dealt with the leader. It will clear us of suspicion. To prove that we're not working with the Ravagers. The Silly Man is dissatisfied with the arrangement of the organization. Take out the catalyst and actively aberrated himself. The aberration of the Silly Man is obviously a reinforcement of his strength. If the transformation is caused by radiation, it's supposed to be removing the suppressor. But he only injected the medicine to complete the transformation. Explain the effect of the medicine. Is to speed up the erosion of the virus. Xiaofeng reasoned the virus was not just because of a clue, but a lot of clues. In a later stage, we will also talk about aberrant viruses in mines. Here, explain the setting of the monster. The aberration of Omnium is actually a kind of evolution. That's why Hykros has always been infatuated with it. But this evolution is directed. No matter what your prototype looks like. In the end, it looks the same. This also explains why the same model displays many monsters. See what the monster looks like in video. Is it different from now? The governor's modeling has been optimized at least twice. Tower of Fantasy has been improving the game experience of newcomers since the public test. That's why I start the plot interpretation until now. Go back to the shelter. Found that the Ravagers ransacked the warehouse. It can be speculated that the cooperation between the Heirs of Aida and the Ravager is. Each takes what he needs. Ravagers want resources. The Heirs of Aida wants to get Shirli. As long as Shirli is aberrated. Courting ZeKe has become a certainty. We found ZeKe. He said he wanted to talk to Franz. Actually, he really walked over there. The characters don't just disappear like traditional MMO. Find Shirli. She lied about being hungry. Actually, she wanted to distract the protagonist. So seeing through everything, the protagonist just came to the lid of the big pot. Didn't cook any food. The plot went on as expected. When we find Shirli, she is sitting quietly. But if we don't get there in time, by this time, Shirli may have committed suicide. But this opportunity was ruined by the protagonist. After that, ZeKe also understood what Shirli thought. He dare not leave an inch. So he commissioned the protagonist to go to the laboratory. Ask the Heirs of Aida for help. Is what Xiaofeng said right? You can recreate your own account and experience it. Especially the Ravager's retreat. It's still very shocking. Such a large army actually abandoned ship and run away. The Ravager is headquartered on Raincaller Island. Dr. Claire once said, they won't leave there for some technical reason. But they involved an attack towards Astra Shelter. There must be something inside here. The identity of the protagonist is very embarrassing. She just came to the shelter. Something happened to the shelter. It's hard not to doubt the relationship between the two. In fact, this has become the reason why ZeKe doesn't like the protagonist in the future. That's all for this issue. Follow Xiaofeng. Take you to experience a different tower.